Let's start this video with DTC P0340. That will be the camshaft position sensor, and most of the time you will always find it inside of the distributor. Also, on some engine you could find it at the head, the cylinder head of where the cam sprockets are located. Since we have a distributor with wires, it's most likely inside the distributor. The ones that are mounted in the camshaft does not have a distributor ignition, but will most likely have a coil pack for the spark plug. So anytime you would receive a DTC P0340, that will be the camshaft sensor in the cylinder head camshaft sprocket, or also inside of the distributor. So let's take a look at what's involved in changing the distributor and its necessary part for restoring engine start. Now, the problem you're going to see here with this engine when the camshaft position sensor malfunction is that it will not start, but it will crank. So it will need excessive cranking to initiate that camshaft position sensor so the engine could start. Sometimes that sensor could fail when the engine temperature is hot. Also, it could also fail while driving. So once the ECU detect a P0340, that is a sign that the camshaft position sensor is malfunctioning and require replacement. Most of the time you're going to have to remove the distributor cap. This is the best way to do it. Try not to take the wires out because that might cause them to break. So once you get this out of the way by taking out those two Phillips screws, then you have to get this plug out of here. And you see you have a tab on the back there that you're going to have to curve your finger around, press it in. Better to use the pliers, needle nose pliers, one of those 45 degrees one. Just pop it out of there, put it to the side. This is the time, like I've done here, you will have to stop disassembling the current distributor and just try to remove it from down there. That will be a 1/2 inch 13mm socket, and replace it with the new one that you receive with the power transistor already assembled, everything in it. So the reason you need to assemble the distributor again is to maintain that alignment when you're going to be dropping this one in completely assembled. So this is going to teach you not to try to take that part out and replace it. It's going to become difficult. Those screws, it's mechanics that has those screwdrivers, and sometimes even those screwdrivers are not able to remove them. Sometimes you have to impact on the tool, and that causes the part to break. Also, you have to remember that bearing on the bottom, the gear that will become worn out as time tells, should say, or the engine endure. So this is the whole reason why we need to get this distributor in and that one out. Removing that distributor bolt, it's going to become the most difficult part for you, because it's not something you're going to think you could do with common tools, since this is the only area that you will be able to do so. Another thing is, when you find the tool for doing it, you have to be careful that you don't brace against this plastic for the TPS sensor and destroy it. If you should, there's a video in the video description on how to reset it and replace it. Now what I want to show you is, this is the tool that I'm using, and at the end of the socket it's like a ball, so it allows the socket to tilt on an angle a little for getting in there and not destroying that TPS. So once that bolt is removed, it will be easy to lift this distributor out. Most of the time these screws are not able to come out, and you're going to have to drill them out. If that's the case, that's what you have to do, then it's better to replace the distributor, and that will requiring taking this bolt out, lifting the distributor up, noticing where the rotor is pointing on the distributor case. When you're going to be replacing the new distributor, you want to make sure you have the same position with the rotor against the housing and the bolt where you're removing it from. This will maintain alignment so you don't have to go through turning the crankshaft for top dead center position. And most of the time this will solve the timing. Since the vehicle has a computer, it will be able to correct any small movement that's not in account. So once we get that bolt out of there, we want to take this out and take a good inspection of it. We want to look at that center, so we can see this is a very good one. That's because I keep check of it. And in here, you see this rotor, that's excellent. So this was recently replaced. Alright, let's get a bird's eye shot of where that rotor is pointing. When we install the new one, have a very good idea at precepting it pretty accurately. Now there's another plug that has to get disconnected, and that's a difficult one. It has a little green tab on the back, something like that. So what you have to do here is on the center, you have to push in on the center. That will have to be done with the screwdriver, and it should lock. If it doesn't lock, then you're going to have to play with it. Once it locks, then you're able to pull this part out and make the detachment. So you're going to grab it, shake it a little, lift it up, take a look at it. So you can see this is a part from Duralast. This is from AutoZone, and it was recently changed. Normally it would have the date on it. I have to check on it and see, but it doesn't show anything. So I would say this is approximately 4 years old. It says ADLG NS60. Okay, so now that we have this out, I have to take this rotor off, put it onto the other distributor. Let's see if I can finesse this here. Okay, now I got that off. Obviously, you're going to be placing stuff on the battery, so make sure it's disconnected. Now you can see I have that hole right there aligned with this. So when I place this in there, it's already lined with the mark where I want it to be. So it's not recommended that you use the old fasteners, but like I said before, mine was recently replaced. And we have to go and look for a bolt. In the bright daylight, I want to see if I could eye that screw, but I know it's right here. So I have this magnetic pole, and there it is. That is something you have to invest in, especially when you have these engines and pieces want to fall along in there. The magnetic pole serves them right. So we want to maintain that alignment like we had on the distributor. That will be on this one here. And we also want to make sure that we can replace the bolt in the same location where it's held down into the engine. So most of the time you will have to advance the rotor, move it ahead of where you want it to be, and when it drops, it will be in that position. So now we have to make our connections. Once we get that green tab retract, that's the position for placing that harness. You have to make sure it's retained onto that steel bracket. That's the position we had previously. And you can see that's where the bolt is. So this is the bolt you're going to want to replace. I'm going to place some lubricant on it. and torque it to factory specification. Once you get that bolt down there, you're going to need a Phillips screw to just start the threads turning it, because it's going to be difficult to get the socket on, and when you do get it on and turn it, it's going to strip the threads. So using this Phillips screwdriver and try to just walk the thread in slowly and nicely, and then you can use the socket for tightening is best. Then you could replace the distributor. Replace the fasteners for the rotor cap. Make sure your rotor cap is in good condition and you have a good rotor cap in there. You look, all of that should be brand new when you receive your distributor, and you want to make sure your distributor hold down bolt is torqued to specification. All the old fasteners and the tools, you want to get them off the engine, off the battery, connect the battery, and let's start the engine and see what happened. The firing order for the engine when you're going to be replacing the distributor cap on the wire, the firing order is cylinder number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So number 1 cylinder is over there. This is number 2, number 3, 4, 5, and the last one between the firewall is 6. It is best to replace the distributor cap, rotor, and wire at the same time of replacement of the distributor. So that's starting the engine right after changing the distributor. You did not have to go through any sequence with the timing light or adjusting any timing. The computer will find that timing by checking that cam sensor and that cam light, the cam plate, and it will find a perfect idle. The only thing we don't want to see is a P0340 and no misfire code. This is bringing us to the end of the video. There are other videos in the video description that you could look at to get a better idea of what's going on. So this video was changing the distributor for the Nissan Frontier 2003 V6 engine. That's the VG33E. Here's a distributor that was ordered from the dealer, and it's always best to place the complete distributor in the engine. So what I have going on here is I've removed that part, which is known as a power resistor. Inside there is a camshaft position center. There's a light, a photo light that goes through this plate. You see this plate here with all the windows. So in the video description you could click on a video link that will discuss most of the stuff that's associated with this distributor. But this is the part we're going to change. So you can see it has some coating in there, and that's to protect the pin from becoming corroded or rusted out. So that plate is what's sliced between that sensor, and it gives the necessary data to the ECU for controlling ignition and fuel timing. Very important. Without this signal, the engine cannot start. And sometimes this part will fail when it gets hot. So driving down the road, it could cause the engine to shut off. You will know when this part failed because most of the time it will give a DTC P0340. In the event it does not give that code, you're going to have to check the wires for spark. Most likely you're not going to receive any spark, since the signal from it is required for spark and fuel. And also you might not receive signal for the fuel, but most likely you will, since the mass airflow sensor is associated with the fuel signal. Now replacing this part is going to be difficult. The most difficult part is going to be to remove this disc which only could go on here one way, so you can't confuse it. And this little distributor cap rotor holder in place. That screw is going to be difficult once the distributor is out like this, but if it's in the engine, it will most likely be easy to remove. So there you can see the two screwdrivers that you're going to need. And it will need removal to get this out. Now this is a brand new part. You can look at it on the back. I was investigating if I had used it because of this condition of the pin, and apparently it does not look so. So this is what's going to replace the distributor in the engine, and the distributor is going to remain in location. Now, most of the time it is required that you replace this complete distributor by taking that bolt out from here, the adjuster bolt, and you have to maintain the alignment with the rotor cap and the rotor electrode when you're dropping in that new distributor. That's the most important part. Once you can get that part correct, everything will be okay. You don't have to turn the crankshaft pulley to get it back to top degrees center, top dead center, or 0 degree. You just replace it the way you remove the old one. And that's the best way for getting the distributor completely removed. The reason you want to replace the distributor is because there's bearing in here that could fail. The gear sometime wore out, and if the gear wore out, there's going to be a lash that's associated with it, and that's going to delay or advance your cam timing. So that's to show you that's a Nissan dealer distributor. And in the video description, there's a link on how to replace the distributor. The distributor is considered to be a high energy distributor because this coil is approximately 50 to 60,000 volts. Here's the distributor cap, and what's unique about this ignition coil, this distributor, is that it's considered to be a high ignition distributor because there's no wire going from the coil that's here distributing the power. It has a solid connection, so that eliminates problem with wires. But remember, the cap could also crack the plastic, and the heat could also cause the electrodes to wear out, and that could lead to misfire. So you must replace the cap and the rotor when you're going to be replacing this sensor and solving DTC P0340. Now when you take a look at this cap, you will see on the inside there's a button here. You also have to check that, making sure it does not wear out, because if this is worn out, it will not have a strong connection to the rotor, and that could lead to a misfire. You also have to check that center connection with this button on the rotor, making sure that it's not worn out. So here is what inside of one of these power transistor look like. That's the terminal that goes up to the optical sensor, the cam sensor, and those terminals are connected to this circuit board. This is the back of the circuit board. It goes like this. That's this right here. And you can see on the inside of the circuit board you have some connection. It's damaged during the process of removing it. And a lot of computing is done inside of this power transistor. So it's only requiring the ECU to do minimum processing. And that's why it's very important that the sensor is replaced with preferably a genuine Nissan dealer sensor. In our case, we couldn't do that. But the distributors are very cheap. Probably get them less for $100 today. maybe online, maybe the parts store, and those are good enough to last. I would say this sensor would last for approximately another 4 years. That's about what I got from the one that's in there now, because you have to remember this is, I believe, yes, this is the factory OEM one. You see it says there RSB-56A, and it has it. So this is the factory one. So this is going to be another replacement to solve DTC P0340. Removing that center screw, that hub that holds the rotor, is much easier done with the flathead, I've noticed, compared to a Phillips or Star. Let's get this rotor out of here. As you can see, that's the disc that we want to get out of here. So this only goes in one position, and now you can see by how the center is. Once that's out of the way, you need to get this here out of the way. So this is on a jar to hold that angle window, camshaft angle window. This also references the crankshaft sensor. I believe it does it at a 1 degree position and a 120 degree position. In another video, we're going to take a test on this transistor to see if we could detect the issue that it's having with the no start. Most of the time it will not, since the problem is only occurring intermittently when the engine is hot. But what we're going to do is we're going to change this coil. You can see how corrosive it is. I'll put a new coil in there. So this here, what you see I got going on here, is something that you shouldn't be doing, like having all these parts on the engine. Because if the parts fall down in that engine, it's going to lead you to more problems. So since I have experience in fingering the nut and bolts, I should say, that don't likely happen. In the event it should happen with you, you could get a magnetic pole and try to get down there and see if you could get that object that fell down. Now, in testing the power transistor, we have 3 wires we have to become familiar with. We have a green wire and a purple wire in the center of the plug, and a black and yellow wire, or maybe black and white, on the far right side. I'm going to take a look at that later and see how to test the transistor with an LED light. But most likely, like I said, you will not detect the problem with the sensor, because the sensor is having the problem when it is hot. So here you can see we have the coil lift out. When you take a look at it, see all the bottom is rotten, corroded. That's not good. So we're going to replace the entire distributor, because that is what's going to happen. And you're going to have to spend hours cleaning down there, and it's not going to be as great as it is. So we're going to use this genuine new one from Nissan and place it in there. Just drop it in like we originally intended. And this coil, which is an aftermarket, pretty sure it is, I'm going to lay it on the side. Might most likely not need it, because the time this sensor fails, that coil might be corroded enough for replacing the whole distributor. And this is the reason why you need to buy a complete distributor whenever you encounter DTC code P0340. That's the camshaft position sensor. And also, if you're getting misfires, random cylinder misfire, we have another video discussing that, all the many causes. It's going to require replacement of the cap and the rotor with the wires. So back to assembling this again and taking it out finally for replacement with that one. Now here's the thing, never put the parts on top of the engine, of any engine like you see here, unless you become like a professional and you trust yourself. But make sure you lubricate this gear when it's to go down on the camshaft gear on the left side cylinder head and maintain your alignment with this ear